Raika, Director, Microeconomist at the UNECA, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Excuse me for not pronouncing the name well. So we've taken too much of their time while we were sitting here, and I would quickly ask you, some of you who would like to ask questions, to get ready to put your questions on the table. We have one lady there, one gentleman. Okay, the lady in red. Ladies first, please. You introduce yourself. Well, in French, and it can be interpreted.
Je m'appelle Sherine Abdelazim, je suis journaliste à l'Ahram Hebdo. Bonjour, je m'appelle Sherine Abdelazim, je suis journaliste à l'Ahram Hebdo.
French?
Ça y est?
English.
Ma question, c'est, on a entendu le matin, le 25 millions offres d'emploi. Vous ne trouvez pas que ce chiffre-là est énorme, surtout que la plupart des pays africains souffrent des crises politiques, instabilité sécuritaire. Je pense qu'il y a un grand défi devant ce chiffre-là pour être réalisé.
We take two other questions from Mr.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Emmanuel Rukundo. I'm a certified consultant in financing and investment, working in Europe and East Africa mainly. My question has to do with the access of African countries to the capital market. As you know, there is no development without investment. And the continent is suffering, is in bad need of having access to the capital market. Which are the measures, also in terms of good governance, to enable governments and even corporations to get access to the capital market? Because this is the only way to develop the countries around. This is the only way. Thank you very much.
Good, we take a third question.
Good morning, I'm Naveen Kamel from Ahram Hebdo. I'm just asking about more details about concerning the initiative of 25 million job. Did it start or it will start? Where will get the fund? Especially that in African country or countries or continents, it's difficult to have the fund. Did we start it, and how we plan to get the fund to finance?
Merci. Thanks. I believe these questions are Dr. Marcy. The questions related to 25,000 jobs by 2025. And your question related to... Okay, thank you very much. Dr.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. The question that was raised is related to the jobs strategy, youth jobs strategy of the African Development Bank. And this is basically the goal that the bank has put forward to achieve over the next decade. So this is over a time period. And that's basically the goal for the bank to contribute through financing projects to make sure that there are jobs created for youth. On the question related to access to finance and capital market, totally agree with the person that had asked that question, that definitely this is needed, and this is needed actually to free more space for the small and medium enterprises to get access to finance from banks, and given the ability of the larger firms to actually be able to tap international capital markets and local capital markets. So this is an area that we need to work on more to broaden the access to finance for the whole corporate sphere. Colleagues, if you...
Yes, Dr.
Yes. Gilpin.
Yes, Gilpin, yes.
I'd just like to thank you so much for those excellent questions. I'd just like to add a little bit to what my colleague has mentioned. A number of organizations have put aspirational targets when it comes to how many jobs are likely to be created if certain things are done. So my perspective is, let's focus less on the numbers and more on what needs to be done to transform the economies so they could absorb these aspirational numbers that are being put out there. One thing that is central, critical to all of this conversation about jobs is understanding how to rebalance the value chain of what Africa produces and how it produces. Because if Africa continues to produce raw materials and export raw materials, we're not seeing more of the value chain within African economies so that you could expand job creation. So that the rebalancing of the value chain is one important thing. The second important thing is the fact that many jobs in Africa are in the non-formal sector. I prefer not to use the term informal. I say the non-formal sector. Because in the non-formal sector, you see small and micro enterprises, they are pricing risk, they are accessing non-formal credit, and they're doing business, even in the most difficult of circumstances. So how do we provide the policies and the institutions and the programs to support them to scale up what is already being done? The third thing I'd like to mention here is the African Continental Free Trade Area agreements, which is designed to be an accelerator for trade and development across the African continent. If African countries are trading amongst each other and they're doing a lot more of the manufacturing and the service sectors become regional hubs rather than just in small national economies, you would see job growth. You would see the sort of numbers that we anticipate in the outer years. So I'd like to highlight the importance of focusing on what needs to be done rather than just the numbers that don't tell the whole story.
Dr. Adam?
Yeah, thanks. On the question of access to market and finance, actually, we at ECA for a long time have been doing research on what can African countries do locally at national level. And we believe that this is where they should start. Governments can have in Africa as a whole, as we have seen through our research, have huge opportunities to mobilize domestic resources. According to a recent report we published this year, African countries have an average government revenue of 15.4% of GDP. The global average is close to 30%. Based on experiences in different countries, we estimate that African countries can increase government revenue as a ratio of GDP by between 12 and 20%. So the opportunities are there. And we have identified the sources of potential revenue rises, which include, one, tax revenue, reforming the tax system in Africa in order to minimize tax evasion and avoidance, and to do away with tax incentives that do not work can help us to increase tax revenue by close to 3% of GDP. Two, through digitization. And examples you can find in African countries, not outside Africa. Kenya, Rwanda, many countries were able to digitalize their tax system and mobilize a lot more tax revenue compared to average African countries. Also, reforming tax administration and addressing issues of tax evasion and avoidance in the natural resource sector can help governments to mobilize a lot of resources. If governments are able to increase government revenue significantly, then governments should, when they need, be able to create a domestic market for government debt. When you are able to create this domestic market, and at the same time, you reform your banking and financial sector, and here I want to emphasize the need for us to have development financial institutions. That is how China developed, that is how Indonesia developed, how many countries in the South are developing today. Today, China Development Bank assets amount to $2 trillion, more than all development finance institutions in the world together. We abandoned development finance for a long time when we were told that they don't work. This is not true, they do work. So, developing our national financial system, whether for government debt or for development finance, for private credit, is the starting point. And when we strengthen this domestic financial system, it will help us to have greater access to global markets.
Hello, thank you, Dr. Adam. Please, we are taking a last set of 3 questions. You've not got the answer?
Which countries will start with the finance, which do I have to repeat? Yeah.
So, you know, what we're talking about basically is the Jobs for Youth and Africa strategy, which covers 2016 to 2025. This is a strategy of the bank for the whole continent. It's not country by country. This is like an overview of the approach of the bank toward this issue of job creation for youth and how can we help with it. So it's a strategy over a time frame and the kind of the bank target that we set for ourselves as ambitious target is to create 25 million jobs over that time frame, over the next decade. And this is through both advisory services in terms of improving skills and employability, as well as through financing projects. But this is an overarching strategy, so this does not have like target country by country. So for example, in 2018, the bank approved 112 projects that amounting to, that's like around 60% of the total projects of approval in the bank that had investments basically with components that directly support the creation of more jobs for youth and created 1.5 million jobs for youth through these projects basically. So that's just an example of work that has already been done, and these are numbers for the whole continent. And this includes, in a variety of countries, including in fragile countries. We have also a number of other initiatives through which we try to work on issues related to skill development in the continent. So, for example, we've supported a number of excellence centers that are in universities. We supported the first regional ICT Excellence Center in Rwanda, with the vision to have it as similar to what we have in places like MIT type of lab So basically, the idea is to really support the innovation to go from just innovation into entrepreneurship, and successfully.
Okay, please, but quickly, because others would like to speak also.
Just, I would like to understand what you mean when you say we need banking and finance sector reform in Africa. What do you intend exactly, Dr. Eliareka? Do you intend digitalization? Do you intend integration in a global financial system? In which direction should this reform goes? Thank you very much.
One or two other questions, because we have time constraint. Please.
Hi, I'm Marwa Hussein from Al Ahram Ebdo. I want to ask about, I see the big interest the bank is having in job creation, which is a very important issue for African country. But also, what other issues of interest are for the bank to finance? For example, I know that infrastructure and transportation are a main problem in Africa and a main barrier to interchange goods between African countries. So does the bank have interest in such project or to finance such project in African countries? And also, what can be an industrialization plan for Africa? I mean, Africa has a lot of raw materials, but how can, or what are the basics of an industrialization plan really to move forward? And finally, for the SMEs, what else than the access for finance can be done to promote SMEs? And maybe, I don't know if we can follow or take an example from other countries, like Asian countries are the most known to have developed SMEs. Are the same condition can be applied to Africa, or the African situation is quite different? Thanks a lot.
One last person, Iman. If nobody, I think we shall, okay. So women are honored today.
Hi everyone, my name is Nada. I'm a journalist, and I wanted to ask what are the top sectors seeing growth in youth employment in Africa at the moment? What are the top sectors seeing a growth in youth employment in Africa at the moment?
Thank you. Dr. Morsi, will you take...
Sure. So let me just answer. Some of them are not so much related to the conference, but I'll just give you an overview and maybe direct you to where you can find the information. So the bank does work across a variety of sectors. We work in infrastructure, we work in energy, so we work in agriculture. So we have projects across all sectors. And you can find more detailed information. We can link you both in our communication team and on the internet with all the type of portfolio and type of projects that we do, and excellent examples to showcase. And we also support issues especially related also to regional integration, for example, connecting the continent and all. And we do have, one of our what we call high 5 priorities include industrialized Africa. So industrialization is a core issue that the bank focus on, and we also have documents and strategies that look into this. So we will be happy to provide you with some links related to these issues. So maybe I can give the floor to my colleagues, but if I forgot anything, you can come back to me.
Dr. Adam?
Thanks, Hanan. I think this question about financial sector reform is a very important one. What do financial institutions, especially banking sector, do in Africa? We have seen in so many countries banks focused on commercial financing, commercial operations. And, but we have seen recently in a number of African countries, to mention some of them like Morocco, Ethiopia, are really doing a great job in broadening the role of the financial sector, and the banking sector in particular, in terms of promoting financial inclusion and in terms of promoting development finance. So you need really to reform the system, to provide the incentives, to change the structure of the financial institutions, to allow new institutions to come, support new institutions to come to play the role that you need to promote development. So this is what I meant. Today, for example, if you look at financial inclusion in African countries, financial inclusion ranges between about just 12–15% in countries like Sudan, Niger, to about 80% in countries like South Africa. It's a huge difference. That means in countries like Sudan, only 15% of adults have bank accounts. So your banking sector is not really helping much. In Ethiopia, in a few years' time, they were able, with active government interventions, to increase financial inclusion from about 12% to about 38% today. And you see banks expanding to rural areas, serving people in rural areas. This is very critical. And very critical when it comes to the financing of SMEs, mobilization of savings and financing of SMEs, entrepreneurship, and helping youth to create jobs for themselves through microfinance, for example. On the question on industrialization plan for Africa, we in the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, working with African Union Commission, started in 2009 to look at the issue of industrialization in Africa. We have a sister organization, UNIDO, that works on industrialization, but we tried to differ with them on the approach. UNIDO's approach has been a sectoral approach. We argued that in Africa, given the level of development we are in and the challenges we are facing, we need a holistic approach, in the sense that industrial policy has to be mainstreamed and linked to all economic policies, macroeconomic policies, sectoral policies. All the policies have to be articulated and coordinated with your industrial strategies. So we produced a number of reports, almost 10 reports, on Africa's industrialization. And one of them was focused on the nature of industrial policy. So the industrial policy we need in Africa is a dynamic industrial policy, not this static industrial policy we have adopted for too many years under structural adjustment programs, where you have a list of incentives that never work. And we argued strongly against these tax incentives we provide to investors. Just a waste and exploitation of our systems. So you need a dynamic industrial policy that is flexible, that provides targeted incentives that are measurable and that can be adjusted according to performance of industrial enterprises. You also need an industrial policy that is anchored on a national development plan, because industrial policy only works if you have a global vision and a global development plan, so that you can allocate your resources and infrastructure in particular in order to generate and to facilitate investment in different parts of your country and to link them together. So we have a number of reports on our website, and I would like to invite you to just see these reports.
Thank you, Dr. Adam.
Okay.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure every topic has been touched at. And now, what I think is this is a very interesting interactive meeting. Our three officers, our three officials have taken you through the bank, the UNDP, and the UNECAS process. Now, I think you have the materials, and you've been guided on the various websites to write your stories. Please, it's now up to you to spread, to broadcast whatever you want on the African Economic Conference now taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you very much, and see you later.